Imagine, right now, that you wake up tomorrow morning and every single marker of your identity is just, well, it's simply gone.
Just vanish.
Exactly. Your job title, your bank account, your home address, even the clothes in your closet, poof. Because society usually points to those metrics, right? And it says, there it is. That is who you are.
Right. It's how we measure human value.
Yeah. But when you step into the world of extreme poverty, into the absolute margins of human existence, that measuring tape just shatters. It doesn't work anymore. So the question is, what happens to your mind? What happens to your soul when it is reduced entirely to the bare mechanics of survival?
The landscape becomes incredibly murky, honestly. I mean, we like to believe our identity is this solid, immovable structure we've built.
Right, like an inherent part of our character.
Exactly, but stripping away those material foundations reveals something deeply unsettling about human nature and, frankly, about the societal structures we just take for granted.
Which is exactly what our mission is for today's deep dive. We're jumping straight into the existential reality of that abyss, and we're doing it through the lens of George Orwell's seminal 1933 work, Down and Out in Paris and London.
Yeah, and we're bringing in a whole stack of sources for this, including full audiobook transcripts and various literary reviews to really unpack the philosophy here.
Right, because we want to look at what happens when a human being is forced into a life where morality, time, and self-worth are entirely rewritten by hunger. And I want to set the tone right up front for you listening. We are looking at this completely impartially.
Absolutely.
Orwell explores socialist and communist circles. He heavily critiques capitalism. He observes the flaws in institutional charity. But our goal today is just to unpack his observations exactly as he laid them out. We're exploring the philosophy behind the text without taking any political sides.
Right, because this isn't just a memoir of hard times. It is a profound sociological investigation. He's dissecting the actual anatomy of destitution.
Yeah, the hidden infrastructure of extreme poverty.
Yeah.
But before we can understand the grand philosophy of class and labor he uncovers, I feel like we first have to understand the intimate, microscopic phenomenology of simply going broke.
The gap between the illusion of poverty and the reality is just staggering.
It really is. What is the illusion versus the reality for him?
Well, the romanticized version of poverty, right? The starring artist in a garret or some noble sufferer standing on a barricade for a cause.
La Boheme, basically.
Right. But that is entirely dismantled within the first few days of his experience in the Paris slums. The descent isn't dramatic at all. It is overwhelmingly prosaic, it's squalid, and above all, it is just boring.
Boring. That's the word that stuck out to me in the sources.
Yeah, it's not a grand tragedy playing out on a stage. It's this slow, irritating attrition of your humanity.
Let's put you, the listener, right in that room on the Rue de Cocteau. Orwell is living on 6 francs a day, which in the sources they note is roughly a shilling at the time.
Literally anything.
Nothing. And the agony isn't about some sweeping systemic injustice in that moment. It's about these daily microscopic disasters. He describes this moment, right, where he has his very last 80 centimes.
Oh, the milk story.
Yeah. He's boiling a tiny bit of milk over a spirit lamp, and a bug runs in his arm. He flicks it, and it falls plop right into the milk.
And that's it.
That's it. The meal is gone. The day's sustenance is ruined by a reflex. Or the baker. The sheer, unadulterated terror when a baker accidentally cuts a loaf of bread too large and demands 2 extra sous.
2 pennies.
2 pennies. And Orwell literally has to bolt from the shop in a cold sweat because he physically does not possess 2 pennies.
Wrong.
Or the humiliation of trying to pay with a Belgian coin and being rejected.
The focus shrinks entirely to the microeconomics of desperation. The physical hunger is obviously brutal, right? But Orwell highlights something far more insidious here. Poverty tangles you in this suffocating web of lies.
Yes, the secrecy.
Exactly. You discover the profound secrecy attached to being poor. You're reduced to an income that barely sustains biological life, but you dare not admit it to the world around you.
Reading about those initial stages, it honestly reminds me of a bizarre, high-stakes stealth video game.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right.
Yeah.
But the enemies patrolling the map aren't monsters. They're like the laundress and the tobacconist.
Yeah.
You are forced into this elaborate, exhausting pantomime just to maintain the illusion of your former life.
Because society criminalizes failure.
Exactly. You stop sending your clothes to the laundry because you can't pay. But when the laundress catches you in the street, you can't just say, "I'm broke." You have to mumble some excuse about taking your business elsewhere.
Which offends her.
Right. She thinks you're insulting her work and becomes your enemy. You lie to the tobacconist about cutting down on smoking for your health. You specifically buy the slightly more expensive rye bread simply because the loaves are round.
So they fit in your pockets.
Yes, they can be smuggled into your hotel room in your coat pockets without anyone seeing you carrying a cheap baguette.
The cognitive load of that pantomime is immense. You aren't just physically hungry. Your entire mental bandwidth is consumed by the logistics of hiding your hunger. It's a profound isolation.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. A man who has lived for a week on bread and margarine, as Orwell notes, undergoes a complete physiological and psychological reduction. He is no longer a man. He is, in Orwell's words, only a belly with a few accessory organs.
Only a belly. Wow.
His brain exists solely to service the immediate demands of his stomach.
But the paradox here, and this is where it gets really philosophical once you cross a certain threshold, the exhaustion of that stealth game breaks. The anxiety of maintaining the illusion snaps.
Yes, the relief of the bottom.
Right. It's replaced by this counterintuitive shift, which is the total annihilation of the future.
Think about the mechanics of anxiety for a minute. Anxiety requires a future to worry about, right? It requires a baseline level of possession or status that you are terrified of losing.
You have to have something to lose.
Exactly. When you have 100 francs in the world, you are in a state of craven, desperate panic. Every centime spent is a step closer to the edge. You are constantly calculating. But when you only have 3 francs left,
The edge is gone.
you've fallen over it. The future ceases to exist. You can only think about the next meal. You might be bored, you might be malnourished, but you are abruptly, terrifyingly unafraid.
The line Orwell writes, and this is from the text, "You have talked so often of going to the dogs, and well, here are the dogs, and you have reached them, and you can stand it."
It's chilling.
It is chilling, but it makes perfect sense. There's a dark liberation in hitting absolute rock bottom. Poverty suddenly frees you from ordinary standards of behavior. You don't have to pretend for the laundress anymore. You are liberated from the pressure of decency.
Because society maintains leverage over its citizens through this complex web of expectations, moral codes, the promise of future security.
Right, the carrot and the stick.
Strip away the resources, and society inadvertently strips away its leverage. The eccentric, half-mad characters Orwell encounters in those slums live in solitary grooves of life, entirely free from societal judgment. They have nothing left to be leveraged.
That's a fascinating way to look at it. They're untouchable in a way.
They are. But we have to recognize that this freedom from the anxiety of falling is very temporary. The psychological relief is very quickly crushed by the sheer physical mechanics of survival.
Right, because the dogs might be there, but your body still demands calories. And acquiring those calories at the bottom of the ladder requires a descent into a very specific kind of physical hell. The chaotic freedom of the slum gives way to the rigid, brutal structure of the workplace.
Enter Hotel X.
Enter Hotel X.
Oh.
Orwell gets a job in the labyrinthine cellars of this luxury hotel as a plongeur, which is a Parisian dishwasher.
The transition from the chaotic streets into the cellars of Hotel X is just a masterclass in contrasting environments. We're moving from the organic neglect of the street into a highly engineered system of, well, hyper-capitalist exploitation stripped of all polite veneer.
The sensory details of this underground world in the transcripts are suffocating. He describes these underground passages that are stiflingly hot, completely dark, reeking of rotting food and old sweat.
With that constant humming noise.
Yes. The whirring noise of furnaces vibrating through the walls. He's thrown into a tiny, windowless cellar, 110 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit, frantically washing dishes, making tea, and running miles a day underground to serve 200 wealthy customers upstairs.
And the yelling is constant.
Oh, the abuse is insane. He actually counted being called macaroni, which was a common insult for Italian immigrants working the kitchens back then. He was called that 39 times in a single day by the head cook. It's a pressure cooker.
What we are witnessing here is a microcosm of class structure, perfectly preserved in amber. Orwell meticulously unpacks the strict, almost military caste system of the hotel.
Right, it's not just a kitchen, it's a hierarchy.
Exactly. At the absolute pinnacle is the manager, who holds the power of professional life and death over everyone. Below him, the head waiter, the maitre d'hotel, who never serves unless it's royalty.
Naturally.
Then the head cook, who views himself as an artist and demands absolute deference. Then the ordinary waiters, who are essentially snobs, identifying upward with the wealthy clients they serve. And at the very, very bottom...
Below even the chambermaids. Right?
Yes, below the chambermaids is the plongeur, the dishwasher.
And the etiquette of this caste system is just mind-blowing to me. Like the facial hair rules.
Oh, the mustaches.
Yes. Waiters in these fancy hotels don't wear mustaches because they want to appear superior, clean-shaven, vaguely aristocratic. So to maintain the hierarchy, they decree that plongeurs cannot wear mustaches either.
They enforce the dress code downward.
Right. But meanwhile, the cooks intentionally wear huge, bristling mustaches just to show their absolute, unquestionable contempt for the waiters. It's this incredibly complex, unspoken language of power and subjection, all playing out over dirty dishwater.
The mustache rule is a perfect philosophical illustration of how hierarchies sustain themselves through arbitrary cultural signifiers. I mean, a mustache has no functional impact on a man's ability to wash a plate, right?
Obviously not.
It is purely a tool of social stratification. By controlling the physical appearance of the plongeur, the waiters exert dominance. They remind the dishwasher of his place in the pecking order.
It's all about control. But the most significant observation Orwell makes in Hotel X isn't just about the infighting among the staff. It's about the fundamental systemic deception perpetrated on the customer.
The shams of luxury.
The shams of luxury. Listen, if you ever want to eat in a fancy restaurant again, maybe plug your ears for this part.
It's pretty rough.
He draws this razor-sharp contrast between the gleaming dining room, the spotless tablecloths, the crystal bowls of flowers, the painted cherubim on the ceiling, and a vile squalor literally mere inches behind the double doors.
The physical barrier of those double doors separates the illusion of civilization from the reality of its production.
Precisely. On one side, the waiter glides over the thick carpet with a solemn, priest-like air, bowing reverently to the customer. But 10 seconds earlier, behind those doors, that exact same waiter was slithering around on a floor compounded of soapy water, rotten lettuce leaves, and trampled food.
Washing his own face in the dishwater.
Yes, washing his face in the same tepid water used to rinse the clean crockery. And the head cook, the self-proclaimed artist, is picking up the prime steaks with his bare, unwashed fingers, licking the gravy off his thumb to taste it, and slapping the meat back down onto the pristine porcelain plate.
This extreme juxtaposition raises a really crucial question about the nature of the labor itself. Orwell analyzes this and comes to a rather startling conclusion. He says the agonizing 15-hour-a-day work of the plongeur is not actually necessary for civilization.
Right.
He argues it exists purely to maintain the shams of smartness. The customer believes they are paying for good service and excellent food. The employee knows they are just doing the boulot the job, which is essentially a theatrical imitation of good service.
So it's all theater.
Efficiency and punctuality are prioritized entirely over actual cleanliness or quality. The appearance of luxury is the product, not the luxury itself.
But wait, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we generally have this deeply ingrained cultural reverence for hard work. If a man is sweating 15 hours a day in a 130-degree cellar, our instinct is to assume he's contributing something fundamental to society. Are we saying all this grueling labor is entirely pointless?
Orwell is arguing exactly that. He states it is largely useless drudgery. And this is where his sociological critique cuts deepest into the bedrock of modern economics. He theorizes that society actively perpetuates this useless drudgery out of a superstitious fear of the mob.
A fear of the mob. So the grueling shifts are a feature, not a bug.
Yes.
Like a treadmill designed specifically to keep them too tired to unionize or rebel.
That is the exact mechanism he proposes. Orwell argues that the educated and wealthy classes harbor a subconscious dread that if the poor had leisure time, if they weren't physically destroyed by 15 hours of swabbing dishes, they would have the energy to think.
And thinking is dangerous.
Extremely dangerous. If they could think, they would inevitably realize the immense disparity in wealth and power, and they would become a threat. Therefore, keeping a man trapped in an endless rhythm of work and sleep that makes intellectual life impossible isn't just an unfortunate byproduct of the restaurant industry, it is a vital structural mechanism of social control.
Wow. A plongeur is a modern slave kept busy to prevent him from thinking.
Exactly. He quotes Marcus Cato, who said, "A slave should be working when he's not sleeping."
That is a chilling way to look at the economy of service. It's not about the dishes being clean at all. It's about the dishwasher being fundamentally neutralized.
And the ultimate tragedy here is that the plongeur internalizes this subjugation. They take a perverse pride in being what they call a débrouillard, a drudge who can handle any impossible, crushing amount of work thrown at them.
So they brag about how much they suffer.
Yes. Their pride is entirely centered on their capacity to endure abuse. When the oppressed take pride in their oppression, the system perpetuates itself without the need for external force.
It's a closed loop of misery. The treadmill powers itself. But this soul-crushing routine at the hotel is only one way the poor survive, right? As Orwell shows us in the streets of Paris, others try to scheme their way out, relying on absurd hopes and dark human instincts.
Yes, the chaotic individualism of Paris really shines through here.
We see this vividly in one of the most fascinating figures Orwell encounters.
Boris. He is a brilliant study in human resilience and the psychological necessity of delusion. He's a Russian ex-captain, a refugee who lost everything in the revolution and now finds himself starving in the Paris slums.
He's a tragicomedy all by himself. Even while he's literally starving, sleeping on the floor of a bug-infested room shared with a mechanic who steals his money, Boris is talking grandly about his past 200 mistresses and his inevitable, imminent future wealth.
The optimism is relentless.
It is. He insists on keeping his waiter's tailcoat out of the pawn shop, even when he hasn't eaten a full meal in days and the pawn shop could buy him a week of bread.
If we look at Boris's behavior through a philosophical lens, that tailcoat isn't just a piece of clothing. It serves as his psychological tether to a past identity.
To his humanity, almost.
Right. To pawn the tailcoat is to cross a mental Rubicon. It is to admit that he is no longer a gentleman temporarily down on his luck, but a permanent resident of the abyss. His delusions of grandeur are the psychological armor that prevents him from being completely destroyed by his reality.
I see what you mean. The delusions aren't madness. They are a survival strategy. And the lengths they go to for these delusions are incredible, like the fake Russian communist secret society.
Oh, that story is incredible.
It's absurd. Boris's friend tells them about this secret society that pays for articles. Boris and Orwell, who were completely broke, scraped together a few francs to go, and the secret society tells them they have to bring a parcel of washing to look like they're going to the laundry downstairs, just to maintain the spy movie illusion.
Just bizarre.
They pay an entrance fee, and of course it's a complete scam. The society vanishes a few days later. But Boris was in a state of sacrificial ecstasy over it while it lasted. He needed the illusion more than he needed the francs.
It really highlights how vulnerability is relentlessly exploited at the bottom, but it also demonstrates that hope, even when it is utterly absurd and objectively false, is a biological imperative for survival. They survive the physical starvation because Boris can always conjure a new fantasy of imminent wealth to feed their minds.
But then those fantasies collide violently with reality, don't they? Like with the disaster of the Auberge de Jean in Qatar.
The fake Norman restaurant.
Yes. Boris gets them both hired at this restaurant before it even opens. And it is a masterclass in sheer incompetence. The proprietor has no money, the electricity isn't working. There's a tree, a literal tree growing in the middle of the meat shed.
Rats are eating the ham off the prep tables.
They're wiping clean dishes with the proprietor's shirt because they can't afford towels. It's a farce.
While it's presented with a certain dark, farcical humor, Orwell uses the auberge to indict the cheap, exploitative capitalism of the era. The proprietor is attempting to create a fake chic vanity project with zero capital investment. And who pays the price for this economic fiction?
Wait, underclass.
Exactly. Orwell and the cook are working 17-and-a-half-hour days, completely unpaid initially, sweating and suffering to prop up a fundamentally bankrupt enterprise. The physical toll of business failure is entirely outsourced to the workers at the bottom. They act as the shock absorbers for the proprietor's incompetence.
It's all built on a foundation of sand, and the workers are the ones being buried when it collapses. But, the environment of extreme poverty doesn't just crush you physically or exploit you economically. It strips you morally.
That is a much darker reality of this descent.
It really is. Take someone like Charlie in the Paris slums. Here's a kid from a good family who ran away to the streets. He gets drunk in a bistro and tells this story to the whole bar about how he stole 1,000 francs from his brother.
Right.
And he decides he wants to experience true love. So he goes to this terrifying, ruinous house, pays a thin old woman the money, and goes down into a cellar bathed in blood-red light. He finds a terrified 20-year-old peasant girl there who is clearly sold into this life. And Charlie doesn't feel pity, he attacks her.
It's a brutal scene.
He describes to the bar the joy of her crying out for mercy, saying he would have murdered her if it weren't for the law.
It is a harrowing narrative, and as we said, we must view it impartially as a sociological data point. Orwell is presenting about the nature of the abyss. Extreme poverty and the environments it breeds can generate a profound, grotesque selfishness.
It destroys empathy.
Entirely. When human beings are reduced to an animal state of survival, abstract concepts like love, empathy, and morality are annihilated. They become mere commodities, or worse, expressions of brutal, dominating power. Charlie views his violence not as a moral failing, but as the height of refined pleasure, precisely because his environment has entirely inverted his moral compass.
The abyss doesn't just make you hungry, it can make you monstrous.
That's the existential threat of poverty.
It's a terrifying thought, that morality might just be a luxury of the fed, that beneath the thin veneer of civilization, the desperate will consume the weak without a second thought. But, as harrowing and chaotic as Paris is, Orwell finds it has a certain vibrant individuality. The people are eccentric, the bistros are full of life and argument.
It has a pull.
It does. But then, he gets a ticket back to England. And when he moves to London, he discovers a very different, far colder infrastructure of poverty.
The transition from Paris to London is a transition from organic, chaotic neglect to systemic, bureaucratic dehumanization.
Let's unpack this shift, starting with the physical transformation, because this is huge. Orwell arrives in London, realizes his promised job has fallen through for a month, and he has to trade his gentleman's clothes for a tramp's rags at a secondhand shop.
The moment he puts them on, society's perception of him alters instantaneously.
He says people look at him as though he were a dead cat.
This is a profound observation about identity and aesthetics in the modern world. In the eyes of society, the clothes do not just make the man. The clothes are the man.
It's like donning an invisibility cloak, but instead of making you unseen, it makes you universally disguised. It's like walking around with a critically low Uber rating physically printed on your forehead. It predetermines every single interaction you're going to have.
That's a great analogy.
You cease to be George Orwell, the educated writer, the complex human being, and you instantly become Tramp, a distinct species of subhuman parasite. People physically recoil from you. Your clothes are an absolute social uniform.
And this societal view dictates the entire architecture of London's poverty. Contrast the two cities as Orwell presents them. Paris was the land of the bistro and the sweatshop exploitative, yes, but leaving room for individual chaos and eccentric survival. Boris and Charlie could exist there.
Right.
London, he observes, is the land of the tea shop, the labor exchange, and institutionalized charity.
He ends up in what they call the Spike, the casual wards run by the state and the Salvation Army hostels. And it is incredibly grim. At the Salvation Army, there are strict rules against gambling or playing cards. They call it a detestable evil.
Everything is regimented.
You are forced to listen to sermons to get your tea. You are herded like cattle, stripped, inspected, locked in cells.
London's system is deeply bureaucratic. It provides a baseline of physical survival, a crust of bread, a clean-ish bed. But the cost of that survival is systematic dehumanization. It strips the individual of their agency in a way Paris did not.
How so exactly?
Well, in Paris, you might starve in a ditch, but you were free to be a madman. You were free to retain your internal narrative. In London, charity is weaponized to enforce moral conformity. The bureaucracy manages the poor, but it fundamentally despises them.
It's a punitive charity.
Yeah.
You're being actively punished for needing help. Orwell actually breaks down the suffering of the tramp into 3 specific evils. And I asked you to lay these out earlier because it's not just being sad about having no money. It's a mechanical destruction of the self.
Let's go through them. First is hunger and malnutrition. The casual wards give a ration that is intentionally insufficient. Bread and margarine, maybe some weak tea.
This isn't just about a growling stomach. It slowly rots the body and the mind. It drains the physical capacity to ever work again.
Exactly. It creates the very lethargy that society then turns around and blames the tramp for having. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy of physical degradation.
Then there's the second evil, enforced idleness. The vagrancy laws of the time prevented tramps from settling in one place. They were legally forced to walk from spike to spike or sit in holding cells for hours on end.
They are denied the right to work and denied the right to rest.
Think about how that physically changes brain chemistry. When you have absolutely no agency, no tasks, no stimulation, your mind just goes blank. It reduces them to a state of apathetic despair.
The human mind requires friction to maintain its shape. It requires problems to solve, tasks to accomplish, or at least the freedom of movement. When you enforce absolute idleness on a population, you aren't just wasting their time, you are actively dismantling their cognitive function.
And that leads right into the third evil, which honestly completely surprised me when I was reading the transcripts, sexual starvation.
It's rarely discussed.
Right. Orwell points out that at the absolute bottom of society, women are vastly outnumbered by men. A tramp is entirely cut off from contact with women. He is condemned to perpetual celibacy without choice.
And Orwell argues that being utterly cut off from the opposite sex degrades a man, destroying his self-respect and making him feel like a cripple or a lunatic.
It is a profound, invisible psychological mutilation, being deemed entirely unlovable and untouchable by half the human race.
It strips away another fundamental pillar of human identity. To be desired, to have companionship, is a core human need. When society revokes that possibility entirely, the individual internalizes a sense of monstrousness.
So you have a human mind subjected to systemic malnutrition, endless empty time, and total social and sexual isolation. How does a person survive that absolute degradation without simply shutting down?
Orwell gives us two opposing philosophical answers to this through two very distinct characters he meets on the road, Patty and Bozo.
Patty and Bozo. They represent the dichotomy of the human response to the void of extreme poverty.
Yeah.
Let's start with Patty. Patty is an Irish tramp, and he is profoundly pitiful. But he's not pitiful because he's lazy.
No.
That's the stereotype we always hear, right? The lazy bum who just doesn't want to work. But Orwell explicitly says Patty is miserable, precisely because he actually has the work habit deep in his bones.
This is a crucial distinction Orwell makes about the intersection of class, education, and poverty. He observes that an educated man can survive idleness. If you have internal resources, if you can read, philosophize, imagine, or analyze your surroundings, you can endure empty time. Your mind can feed on itself.
But Patty is a manual laborer.
He has no mental resources to fill his enforced idleness. Without work, Orwell says, Patty is as miserable as a dog on a chain. The true evil of poverty here is that it faces an uneducated man with a blank, resourceless mind. Patty's tragedy is that he fundamentally accepts society's judgment of him. He believes he's worthless because he is not currently performing manual labor.
He has completely internalized the societal metric of value that we talked about at the very beginning of this discussion. He thinks, I have no job, therefore I am nothing. It's heartbreaking.
It is.
But then, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we have Bozo. Bozo is a pavement artist, a screever, who draws on the sidewalks in London. He is physically disabled, his leg is ruined, he's starving, but he absolutely refuses to let society pity him.
Bozo represents a radical philosophical emancipation. He refuses the premise of his own degradation.
He is incredible. He's an atheist,
Yeah.
and he has this strict personal code of honor. Even when he is literally starving, he absolutely refuses to pick up cigarette butts from the street, and he refuses to sing hymns for charity buns at the Salvation Army. He won't compromise his internal dignity for a meal.
He tells Orwell, I'm a screever, not a beggar.
Right. What Bozo has achieved is a form of existential defiance. Society says you are poor, therefore you are a failure, therefore you must be subservient and grateful for whatever crumbs we give you. Bozo simply rejects the premise.
By declaring himself an enemy of society, by maintaining his intellectual independence and reading astronomy books while sleeping rough, he protects his internal world. If society says he is worthless, he invalidates society's value system. He creates his own meaning. He is penniless, his body is broken, but his mind remains entirely unconquered.
But let's look at how society views Bozo. Bozo is technically a beggar, regardless of his chalk drawings. And society despises beggars because they are seen as parasites who don't work. They don't produce anything. But here is where Orwell completely flips the script and challenges our fundamental definition of work.
It's one of the most provocative and unsettling arguments in the entire text. Orwell asks, what is work? A navvy works by swinging a pick. An accountant works by adding up figures. A beggar works by standing out of doors in all weathers, catching bronchitis, getting varicose veins, enduring public humiliation.
It involves physical suffering.
Yes, physical suffering, endurance, and a specific set of skills to extract money from passersby. Orwell argues that begging is fundamentally a trade.
A trade. That is such a massive paradigm shift. To view the beggar on the corner not as a moral failure, but as an independent contractor in a brutally difficult physical profession.
Orwell admits freely that it is a useless trade. A beggar produces nothing of value. But then he asks the uncomfortable question, are there not many highly respected professions that are equally useless to the actual physical functioning of civilization?
Oh, wow.
Is a corporate lobbyist inherently more useful to human survival than a beggar? Is a stock speculator?
If you follow that logic, it dismantles our entire moral framework regarding wealth. Orwell argues that society doesn't despise the beggar because he doesn't work, but simply because his trade doesn't turn a profit.
Exactly.
We equate virtue with money-making. If begging suddenly yielded a high societal dividend, if a beggar could pull in millions and hire employees, it would instantly become a respected profession. The beggar is just a tradesman whose goods have no market value in a capitalist system.
It is a devastating critique. We judge the morality of an individual's existence by their economic output. Orwell strips away that economic justification and forces us to look at the human mechanisms underneath. A plongeur is a slave kept busy to prevent the mob from thinking. A tramp is a victim of a bureaucratic machine that enforces useless suffering. And a beggar is simply a tradesman operating in a failed market.
So bringing it all together, what are the distilled takeaways from this journey into the abyss? What does Orwell actually want us to see when we look at the margins of society?
I think he wants us to see the mechanics of it.
Right. He shows us that poverty is not just a lack of money in a bank account.
Yeah.
It is a complex, suffocating web of lies, physical malnutrition, deliberate societal ostracization, and the systemic theft of one's time and dignity.
And perhaps most importantly, he demonstrates that our social identity, the very core of who we believe ourselves to be, is astonishingly fragile. The structures we rely on, our jobs, our clothes, our reputations, are not inherent to our being. They are temporary social constructs.
When they are removed, what is left is either the crushing despair of a Paddy, who believes the world's judgment of him, or the radical, defiant self-creation of a bozo who rejects it.
It forces you to choose how you define your own soul.
Which brings us to a final, uncomfortable reality. Usually when we talk about a social class or an economic status, there's this expectation of precision, like an X-ray. It's clean. But the abyss breaks the X-ray machine. Orwell shows us that the line between a respected citizen and a despised tramp is astonishingly thin, often nothing more than a change of clothes and a few days without food.
It really is that precarious.
So I want to leave you with a provocative thought to mull over today. If you were stripped of your job, your clothes, and your savings tomorrow, and you were forced into absolute, relentless idleness, what would remain of your identity? Are we truly individuals with inherent, unshakable value? Or are we just the sum of the social utilities we perform for others?
A haunting question to end on.
Thanks for taking the plunge with us today. Keep questioning the water you're swimming in.